I think we need to rethink the consciousness of Salvadorians. Unfortunately, I think the kind of society that we have developed has worked against us in that we have been disconnected from the harmony that we should have with nature. It is necessary for us to rethink that and incorporate needs of our environment into our human needs, to incorporate the social cost of a degraded environment into any social analysis that we have. And that requires a shifting of consciousness. And this is not only a Salvadorian issue, I think it's a collective issue.
In recent years, El Salvador has been struggling with a water crisis. Despite annual rainfall, the country has little water storage capacity. This is in part due to how much of the region has been deforested. As of yet, only 3% of its original forest remains. However, a new threat to the country's water has surfaced recently. El Salvador resides in what's called the Mesoamerican mineral belt, which contains deposits of gold, silver, lead, copper, and other metals. The problem with mining in this region is that extraction processes requires the use of toxic chemicals, including cyanide. Given the small geography of the country, chemicals often leak from these mining sites into rivers, polluting the water and harming communities. Realizing the environmental impacts, the government of El Salvador issued a moratorium on mining in 2008. This meant that companies were no longer granted permits or licenses. However, it was temporary. But the people of El Salvador didn't want temporary, they wanted a full ban. And so NGOs, organizations, and communities started an anti-mining social movement. It was nearly impossible to generate change at the national level, so the efforts were focused on local communities instead. They began strategically using what's called the Consulta Popular, essentially a legally binding referenda that asks communities whether or not they would allow the involvement of mining companies in their municipalities. So far, there have been 4 consultas. Observing the most recent consulta, and with a group of students, is Amanda Jibb.
The other courses that I teach abroad are about genocide. And I think there is, in spite of the struggle, there is a hopefulness that really comes out at the end of this course through the community's will to hold a referendum on mining and to assert their democratic right to decision-making about their own territories. And I think being an observer to that and really understanding the political and historical background and the way that the students did was just a tremendous mix pedagogically.
That's Amanda Jibb, Associate Professor of Information Media Studies here at Western. Her research is primarily focused on the Holocaust and comparative genocide studies, though recently she's been working in El Salvador on several projects. While she's visited the country many times, this is the first time she invited a group of students to act as international observers.
So it was about a year of planning, and initially I thought I would offer this as a kind of alternative to the alternative spring break program. We would travel around the country, but not with the same kind of emphasis on service where you volunteer at an orphanage. Instead, this experience is really designed to bring students in a more kind of horizontal way in contact with communities and community leaders, so that we can share knowledge and have discussions on the ground about conditions. I think it couldn't have been better organized, and I don't take responsibility for that. That's Pedro's.
How did you meet and end up working with Amanda?
Social media. She contacted me through Facebook one day, and she provided me some information on the issue of mining. I'm not quite sure how she found out about me.
I've long been an admirer of Pedro's work in the anti-mining struggle in El Salvador.
My name is Pedro Cabeza.
This is Pedro, a Salvadoran national and a bit of a renaissance man in mining advocacy. Currently, he's working with 3 organizations, including Cryptis, Salvade, and International Allies Against Mining.
Depending on who you ask, I have a lot of different roles.
Since returning to El Salvador from Canada, Pedro has primarily been focused on mining, which brings us to the purpose of the trip, the consulta. popular.
Consulta Popular is a democratic local democracy process that is embedded in the municipal code of El Salvador, where a municipality or members of a municipality can request by petition to the local community council to hold a consultation on any issue that matters to the community.
This was a provision in the Salvadorian Constitution after the peace accords in 1992 that allowed municipalities to hold binding referenda on a particular topic affecting the community.
In this case, we're using that figure, like legal figure, to ask local community councils to hold consultations on mining and whether or not the population in a specific municipality is in agreement with mining projects in their territories. We just recently held the fifth referendum, local referendum, in the municipality of Sinquera. Before that, there were 4 municipalities in the department of Chalatenango, El Salvador. We had San Jose Las Flores, San Isidro Labrador, Nueva Trinidad, and Arcatao. In all of those municipalities, we've had an average participation of 55 to 65% of registered voters. Registered voters have to participate both in petitioning the council and in voting for on any side of the specific issue. And of those who participate, more than 98% have said that they're opposed to mining projects in their territories. We are at the verge of losing our capacity to be self-sustainable and to have an environment that sustains the culture and the population of the country.
I think it's first really important to understand the context. So El Salvador is a country that is heavily deforested, both because of the Civil War, but also because of monocropping. It was a coffee crop country, and there were huge plantations that required massive amounts of deforestation. So 90% of El Salvador is deforested. A recent study, I think in 2010, showed that only 2% of the surface water in El Salvador is fit for human consumption and ideal for the growth of aquatic life. There's certainly evidence of the toxic legacy of mining in La Union, in the canton of San Sebastian, which we visited with our class, in which a mine, a traditional tunnel mine, once owned by U.S. Commerce Group, was abandoned and not properly closed, and none of the environmental toxins from the mine were adequately dealt with or dealt with in any way. The company left behind 2 giant shipping containers full of cyanide and heavy metals and other toxic substances, cyanide, arsenic. They continue to leach out of the mine through the farmers' fields and into the San Sebastian River, which is completely toxic. There's nothing living in that river.
El Salvador is a small country, the smallest country in the continent, only 20,000 square kilometers. We have the largest density of population in the continent, 300 citizens per square kilometers. And we live in a geographically vulnerable area. We have a large concentration of volcanoes that are maintaining a lot of volcanic activity. Up until now, we have at least 3 active volcanoes in the country. Under these conditions, we believe that the mining industry is not viable in the country because the environmental cost of mining is much higher than the short-term economic cost that the industry could bring to the country.
The struggle of communities to retain control of their own territories is a global issue. What I think is particularly important for us as Canadians and residents of Canada is to understand the impact of Canadian companies abroad. I think that we often either don't think about it or have only one perspective, and it's really important to hear from people on the ground and to listen to those people living in affected communities to more deeply understand the issues there.
I think it's important for people internationally to be aware of the world they exist and they live in. I think it's important for people to understand the consequences of their of their day-to-day actions, particularly people that live in North America. You know, we live in a globalized world, but we're not aware and conscious of it. You know, like if you ask anybody on a regular day, you know, where your shoes are made, where your pants are made, who picks the food you eat, people don't think about it. Those are issues that they're not aware of.
After a full day observing the Consulta Popular in Sinquera, the count finally begins. Surrounding each polling station across the municipality, people are lining up to see the results. Anticipation is high. And then, with 52% of the population participating, 98% of the people voted against mining. Sinquera is unique amongst the previous consultas in that it resides in Cabañas, a province that's known to be more divisive on the issue of mining. While there's a lot of opposition to mining projects, there's also been a lot of support for it, especially considering the fact that Cabañas is the location of the El Dorado mining project, headed by Oceana Gold, a company that previously sued El Salvador for $250 million for refusing to allow it to dig for gold.
This territory has been the source of conflicts. 5 environmentalists died in 2009 as a result of their opposition to mining. And Sinquera is located in Cabañas and is very close to the Oceana Gold's mining project. And so we were having a bit of concern about the process, because we were expecting that there might be some more divisions and potential conflicts in the community, but we were lucky that we did not have any conflicts.
This consulta is but a small win in the larger national struggle against mining companies. The ultimate goal is to eventually lobby the government to ban mining at the national level.
The consultas have been done in that context of larger community organizing, in the context of engaging new actors, in this case municipal governments, that in the national debate against mining. So we definitely want to have many more consultas in lieu of a national law, but the ultimate goal is to pressure the Legislative Assembly to prohibit mining at the national level.